Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable Chief Guest, respected Chair of the session, respected Director General, BIISS, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to all of you. On behalf of Bangladesh Institute of International and Strategic Studies, may I take this opportunity to welcome you all to the hybrid seminar on promoting multilateral cooperation to prevent human trafficking and migrant smuggling, organized by Bangladesh Institute of International and Strategic Studies, BIISS. At the moment, we are very much honored to have among us His Excellency Charles Whitley, Ambassador and Head of the Delegation of the European Union to Bangladesh, as the Chief Guest. Distinguished guests, in today's seminar, we have an inaugural session and a working session. At the inaugural session, Major General Mohammad Maqsudur Rahman, OSP, BSP, PSC, Director General, BIISS, will deliver his welcome address. Following by the welcome address, today's Chief Guest, His Excellency Charles Whitley, Ambassador and Head of the Delegation of the European Union to Bangladesh, convey his valuable remarks. Lastly, the session chair will make his concluding remarks. After the inaugural session, there will be a break of half an hour for refreshment. We'll reassemble here for the working session at 12:10 p.m. sharp. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, may I now request the chair of the session, Ambassador Qazi Imtiaz Hossain, PAA, Chairman, BIISS, to kindly commence the program. Thank you. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, and good morning to all of you. But before I start, may I request one of my colleagues to fix this laptop and turn off the speaker here. I couldn't do this, and as we because it's causing an echo. Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable Chief Guest, His Excellency Mr. Charles Whitley, Ambassador and Head of Delegation of the European Union to Bangladesh, Major General Mohammad Maqsudur Rahman, Director General of BIS, distinguished panelists, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to all of you. To today's seminar on promoting multilateral cooperation and prevent human trafficking and migrant smuggling. I also extend my very warm welcome to the participants who have joined us through online networks and social media. On behalf of the Institute, I extend my heartfelt thanks and gratitude to Ambassador Charles Whitley for gracing the event as the chief guest. We are particularly delighted to have and would like to extend our warm welcome to Professor Dr. Taslim Siddiqui, Political Science, University of Dhaka, who will be chairing the working session. I also extend my warm welcome to the distinguished speakers at today's seminar, Mr. Muhammad Ubaidullahhaq, Department of International Relations, Dhaka University, and Mr. Eugene Park, Program Manager of Migration and Protection Unit at IOM, Mr. Asif Munir, Migration and Displacement Specialist, and Ms. Benuka Ferdowsi, Research Fellow of this institute. Ms. Benuka Ferdowsi will provide global and Bangladesh perspective of human trafficking and smuggling of migrants. In his intervention, Professor Haq will share his views on the challenges of preventing this menace, while Mr. Eugene Park and Mr. Asif Munir will walk us through the multilateral cooperation in this important area. I would now like to request our Director General, Major General Mohammad Maqsudur Rahman, to deliver his welcome remarks. General Rahman, you have the floor.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable Chief Guest, His Excellency Charles Whitley, Ambassador and Head of the Delegation of European Union to Bangladesh, respected Chairman, Ambassador Imtiaz Hossain, learned panelists, excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and very good morning to you all. On behalf of Bangladesh Institute of International and Strategic Studies, let me welcome you all in today's seminar on promoting multilateral cooperation to prevent human trafficking and migrant smuggling. Our heartfelt gratitude to the Honorable Chief Guest for gracing today's occasion. At the outset, I would like to pay my deepest tribute to the memory of the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and all martyrs who laid their lives for our nation. Ladies and gentlemen, human trafficking and migrant smuggling are two global problems which affects the states and their people in almost every corner of the world. These two crimes are intertwined, but at the same time have distinct difference in terms of purpose, transnationality, role, and comparative position of actors. Every year, thousands of migrants and refugees desperately seeking to escape violence, conflict, and desperate economic condition take hazardous journey by land, sea, or air. In turn, a fraction of those who takes the service of the migrant smuggler fall in the trap of human traffickers. Smugglers and traffickers expose the victim to a range of risks, which include violence, theft, exploitation, sexual violence, kidnapping, and even death. Distinguished guests, the gravity of human trafficking and migrant smuggling can be grasped from their staggering figures. In their global study on smuggling and migrants, the United Nations Office for Drug and Crime, UNODC, found that in 2016, a minimum of 2.5 million migrants were smuggled globally. On the other hand, the Trafficking in Persons Report 2019, published by United States, assumed the number of human trafficking victims to be around 24.9 million. The amount that the migrant smugglers and human traffickers raises from their illegal activities are also huge. In the aforementioned global study of UNODC, it was found that migration smuggler gathered a profit amounting of 5.5 billion to 7 billion US in 2016 alone. On the other hand, human trafficking is the world's third largest crime after drug trafficking and counterfeiting. Distinguished guests, to address the growing global concern over human trafficking and migrant smuggling, many notable protocols and conventions have been adopted at the global level to prevent and counter both human trafficking and migrant smuggling. These attempts highlight the need of active multilateral cooperation for countering these crimes, which often are committed across countries. It is welcoming that the United Nations Trafficking in Person Protocol 2000 has reached almost universal ratification, totaling 178 parties. Another key protocol, the United Nations Protocol on Smuggling of Migrants, so far has 150 parties, which is more than 3/4 of all member states of United Nations. It is also welcoming that since 2003, more traffickers are being convicted every year when the protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in person, especially women and children, entered into force. Currently, more than 90% of the countries criminalize trafficking in line with the United Nations Trafficking in Person Protocol. Learned participants, till date, some regional arrangements are also in operation for countering human trafficking and migrant smuggling. The Bali process is one such regional platform, which was established in 2002 for facilitating discussion and information sharing on issues relating to human trafficking and migrant smuggling. From 2018, IOM, along with European Union and UNODC, is operating another notable initiative named Global Action Against Trafficking in Person and the Smuggling of Migrants. The major aim of the initiative is to assist government, civil society organization, victim of human trafficking and smuggled migrants. Such promising multilateral arrangements encourages states to consider bilateral or multilateral agreements to carry out their law enforcement obligation when investigating, prosecuting, and trying human trafficking. Such multilateral arrangement is a reflection of the realization that to effectively address the human trafficking and migrant smuggling issues, there is an urgent need of collaboration among law enforcement and judicial agencies, as well as of other stakeholders. Ladies and gentlemen, in case of South Asia, open and porous borders are used as easy routes for human trafficking, through which a good number of people, including men and women, and even children, are trafficked for sexual exploitation, forced labor, and servitude. Also within South Asia, irregular migration is often facilitated by smugglers, where some migrants are smuggled within the region and others beyond. Smuggled migrants of South Asia travel by land or sea and sometimes by air to reach European Union or GCC states. It is unfortunate that in 2014 and 15, an estimated 800 people lost their lives in the Bay of Bengal and Andaman Sea while attempting to reach Thailand and Malaysia. It is a matter of regret that a number of Bangladeshis were also there. Detection of Bangladeshi citizens among the rescued smuggled migrants on various occasions is a concern for Bangladesh. Distinguished guests, traffickers and migrant smugglers target victims who are marginalized or in difficult circumstances. Undocumented migrants and people who are in desperate need of employment are also vulnerable, particularly to trafficking for forced labor. Bangladesh is aware of the increasing challenges of human trafficking and the smuggling of migrants. Bangladeshis often take hazardous journey facilitated by migrant smugglers and human traffickers due to lack of knowledge about safe regular migration process, high recruitment fee, and low awareness of the risks, despite having legal and government-facilitated migration mechanism. To address the human trafficking and migrant smuggling, Bangladesh has taken a number of legislative and judicial measures. Realizing the urgency, the government has passed the Prevention and Suppression of Human Trafficking Act in 2012, and Bangladesh has also become a party to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Migrant Workers and their families. Our government has also adopted the Overseas Employment and Migrant Act in 2013 and ratified ILO Core Convention on Forced Labor. Moreover, our government is also implementing a national plan of action for prevention and suppression of human trafficking for the years 2018 to 2022. Apart from this legal framework, we also have institutional setup to prevent human trafficking and migrant smuggling. We have an interministerial National Anti-Trafficking Committee headed by the Secretary of the Ministry of Home Affairs, which meets regularly to monitor progress of the activities undertaken by various ministries and departments to combat trafficking in Bangladesh. We also have GO-NGO National Coordination Committee for Combating Trafficking, composed of representatives of relevant ministries and departments, NGOs, international organizations, and United Nations bodies. Ladies and gentlemen, all these actions prove our government's willingness to work for countering both human trafficking and migrant smuggling. As the fight against trafficking and smuggling of migrants require multi-stakeholders engagement, we are also willing to contribute in the multilateral arrangement for countering this global crime. However, we understand that we need continuous effort and undertake further effective measures to facilitate safe and orderly overseas migration. For this, we need extensive dialogue and participation of stakeholders in the decision-making process of the government. I hope today's hybrid seminar organized by BISS will be of immense value in generating effective measures and suggestions. Finally, again, I express my gratitude to the Honorable Chief Guest, His Excellency Charles Whitley, Ambassador and Head of the Delegation of the European Union to Bangladesh, distinguished panelists, and the learned audience for encouraging us with your kind presence. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you, General Rahman, for your opening remarks. May I now request our chief guest, Ambassador Charles Whitley, to kindly deliver his statement. Ambassador Whitley, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, dear Ambassador Kazim Tez Hussain, Chair, and thank you very much for the warm welcome. Also to Major General Mohammed Maqsudur, Director General of BIS. It's a great pleasure to be back at BIS. I came quite recently with our Special Envoy on the Indo-Pacific. We had a very good, robust exchange, and I think that's the great thing about BIS. It generates ideas and discussion. And congratulations on bringing together such a wide variety of interests on this very important topic, from civil society, governments, ministries, and think tanks and universities and so on. I know there are other people watching online. This is an issue of great interest to the European Union. I think before I begin my prepared speech, I would say there are two words that stand out from the title. One is prevent, and the other is multilateral. And multilateral, of course, it's self-evident that when you have a cross-border problem and challenge like trafficking, you need a cross-border solution. And the European Union is very fond of working together as our member states, but also we don't just spend the whole time locked in basements in Brussels talking to ourselves. We, of course, negotiate in the wider world and discuss in the wider world international issues. And we work together and speak with one voice in the EU on the issue of trafficking and on many other issues. I had the privilege of being the head of the human rights team in New York for 4 years before I left in 2019. And there we sought to speak as one voice as the EU also on trafficking issues, which of course involve many difficult, tricky considerations. And I wanted to highlight the other word, prevent, in this title, because prevent is of course the key. Prevention is better than cure. And that's not as easy as it sounds, because there are many difficult political issues in play. And in Europe, as you will know, there has been a rise of populist voices in our political systems. And one of the issues that's been one of the hot red button topics has been migration and illegal entry to Europe. And that's a recurrent theme for right-wing populists in our countries. And it's important to counter that narrative, to say we are working together in the wider world to prevent trafficking. We are working to try to help those who are trafficked, because after all, they are victims and they need to be treated properly, also when they return to their countries of origin. But also we need to ensure that everybody is on board with this effort, whether it's civil society, government, or international organizations, or indeed supranational organizations like the EU. So I think we all know, of course, that trafficking in human beings is a terrible crime, but it's also one that disproportionately affects women and girls, often who are trafficked for sexual exploitation. Within the EU, 72% of the victims that we know about are women and girls. Between 2017 and 2018, there were more than 14,000 registered victims within the European Union. which is also an increasingly attractive destination for Bangladeshi migrants. Globally, traffickers make estimated profits of 29.4 billion euro in a single year. So it's a massive business with vested interests all over the world. I recall, I don't know if you've seen the advert that ran internationally, I think it was the IOM, which was in black and white and which showed the subtle way that traffickers work to exploit their victims, but also the fact that average citizens of countries don't see the trafficked victims around them, whether the trafficked victims are working as sex workers or in labor intensive industries and so on. We all have turned a blind eye, and that's something that we also need to focus on more. And I think it's important to have that awareness raising. I think the Major General mentioned the importance of awareness raising. And in that sense, the IOM advert was very striking. But with half of the victims identified in the EU being non-EU citizens, cooperation with international partners is key to address trafficking. And that is why I particularly welcome that this seminar focuses on promoting multilateral cooperation to fight these crimes. The new Pact of the EU on Migration and Asylum highlights the importance of the early identification of potential non-EU victims of trafficking. In addition, the EU presented in April 2021 a new strategy on combating trafficking in human beings for the period 21 to 25. And that complements the EU's anti-trafficking directive, a law, which focuses on preventing the crime and bringing traffickers to justice, as well as protecting and empowering victims. As we've heard, the government of Bangladesh is making significant efforts to meet the minimum standards for the elimination of trafficking and retained its Tier 2 status in the 2021 Trafficking in Persons report by the US Department of State. That's because Bangladesh initiated a higher number of prosecutions, began to operate its trafficking tribunals, and collaborated with foreign governments on the transnational trafficking case, amongst other efforts. And these efforts are highly appreciated. We look forward to working with Bangladesh further on them. Also, migrant smuggling, as I've said, is a profitable business for criminal networks, with an estimated annual turnover reaching multiple billion euros worldwide. Smuggling is increasingly associated with serious human rights violations and deaths, in particular when it occurs by sea. The loss of migrants' lives at the hands of smugglers in the Mediterranean reminds us of the acute need to tackle migrant smuggling using all of the legal, operational, and administrative levers that are available. The fact that migrant smuggling networks are closely linked to other forms of serious and organized crime, including trafficking in human beings and money laundering, increases the urgency of our action. The renewed EU action plan against migrant smuggling includes as one of the main pillars a reinforced cooperation with partner countries and international organizations. In line with EU priorities in the region and this new strategy, the EU is supporting the efforts of the government of Bangladesh as regards both trafficking and smuggling. As the Major General mentioned, the EU-funded project GLOACT, Global Action Against Trafficking in Persons and the Smuggling of Migrants, is supporting Bangladesh in developing evidence-based information on trafficking and smuggling patterns and trends, reviewing laws and policies, consolidating the capacity of criminal justice actors, and strengthening international cooperation. The project's key achievements, including the training of more than 600 practitioners and stakeholders, the facilitation of the participation of Bangladesh in various workshops on regional and international cooperation, and the organization of different exchanges with the Parliamentarians' Caucus on Migration and Development. Other EU-funded programs include Pratasha, which works on the reintegration of returnees, as well as promoting safe and legal migration. And it spreads information on how to legally migrate, and that's essential to save lives, prevent human rights abusers, and decrease the cost of migration. I would add that Bangladesh has just been identified by the EU as a country that should be explored for a talent partnership, which is a new way of encouraging legal migration to the EU. It's supposed to ensure that both sides benefit. So the migrant coming from Bangladesh in a certain area like nursing or another speciality will go to the EU to work and train with an undertaking to come back after several years. And we're working towards an agreement on that with Bangladesh. I think that's a very positive development and one that shouldn't be forgotten when we have so much focus on the illegal aspects of migration. So to close, we must all join forces to end these crimes, and I very much welcome this event today. Thank you very much again to the Honourable Chairman and Director General for the invite, and I look forward to hearing the further input from attendees.
Sometimes it's better to come over to the podium and rostrum and make yourself better visible. And that's the reason I've come over here. But before I make my short intervention, I would like to thank Ambassador Whitley for providing us an overview of a very extensive and intensive cooperation that we have with you and with our global partners. One of the things that I will start by saying is the difference between the percentage of trafficked persons disproportionately tilting towards the women. I have a percentage here in my written statement, which says 71%, while Ambassador Whitley said it's 72%. Both of us could be wrong and right as well. But let me stick to the written text so that I don't miss out some of the elements that I thought I would share with very learned audience, and also to request our panelists when they meet to reflect on them. As very rightly pointed out both by Ambassador Whitley and our Director General, the trafficking is a huge problem. It's not a problem in Bangladesh, it's a global problem. But given the very secretive nature of the trafficking, it is almost impossible to figure out how much, what is the exact number. And what is most unfortunate is the staggering 71%, I will stick to my written text here, of trafficking victims around the world are women and girls. And even during the pandemic, where there were extensive travel restrictions, trafficking in person has not stopped. And as a global economic downturn pushes more people into poverty and raise other vulnerabilities, they become more susceptible to exploitation and abuse. As a source, transit and destination country, Bangladesh is well aware of the increasing challenges of human trafficking and smuggling of the migrants. I'll be focusing more on the efforts of our country, because the broader aspect of the whole spectrum of global trafficking problem has been well covered by the intervention made by our Director General. Bangladesh has a zero tolerance policy against trafficking in person. In line with her international commitments, the government of Bangladesh has put in place extensive legal, institutional, and administrative mechanisms and frameworks to countering human trafficking in all its forms. Bangladesh has taken a multi-pronged approach to TIP, encompassing prevention, promotion, protection, and partnership, involving all key stakeholders, including law enforcement agencies, legal community, civil society organizations, non-governmental organizations, and very importantly, the community. Countering trafficking committees has been set up at the union level, the lowest tier of local government. Bangladesh has adopted a strong national TIP law that addresses different aspects of trafficking. In 2019, Bangladesh acceded to the Palermo Protocol, considered to be the cornerstone for national and international cooperation and efforts in countering TIPs. In 2018, the government of Bangladesh launched a national plan of action for combating human trafficking 2018 and 2022, encompassing all types of internal and cross-border human trafficking, including of the refugees. The government has also set up separate tribunals in 7 divisional headquarters for speedy trials of trafficking crimes. A committee at the Ministry of Home Affairs has also been set up to follow up trafficking cases under trial. Given the trans-border and transnational nature of crime, Bangladesh is pursuing bilateral, regional, and international cooperation in combating TIPs. At the UN, Bangladesh actively promotes implementation of global plan of action combating trafficking in person, and at the regional level draws upon SAARC Regional Convention on Trafficking as a basis for collaboration in this area. Despite continuous and relentless efforts of the national governments, regional and international partners, trafficking in person continues unabated and even rising at an alarming pace. The obvious question thus arises, why are these efforts relentless, have not proved to be as effective as we would have wished to root out human trafficking and smuggling of migrants? Allow me, a learned audience and distinguished panelists, to highlight some of the questions that are often raised and some of the thoughts that comes to our mind in terms of how to effectively deal with this menacing crime. We need to identify, first of all, the current shortcomings in the policies and strategies to countering human trafficking and smuggling. The issue of TIP has to be looked at holistically and evaluate the efficacy of current policy framework and strategies to counter TIP. The impact of technological advancement and fast developing digitalization globally should be appropriately factored in our future policies. It is already being doing, but I think we need to look at it more closely. Digital surveillance and use of ICT must be upped as we are faced with an agile transnational organized criminal groups who use digital platforms for their purpose. Capacity building of national government in this sector thus appears to be crucial. Third, the root causes of trafficking in person needs to be addressed. Unless we address the root causes, we can hardly expect a very effective outcome. Fourth, as I've mentioned earlier, 71% of trafficking victims around the world are women and girls, of which women make 49% and girls 23% of all victims of trafficking. Thus, gender dimension of trafficking should receive even greater focus and attention. Fifth, prosecution and conviction remain relatively low and weak globally. National legal framework needs to be strengthened, as well as bilateral, regional, and international mechanism and cooperation. Enforcement of counter TIP laws is critically important and needs to be strengthened. Sixth, there is a need for developing effective intelligence and information sharing platform among members to monitor, intercept TIP-related crimes. IOM, UNODC, Interpol, and others have an important role to play, which they are doing without doubt. Community engagement and awareness is, again, another critical area that has to be looked into, because many a times we see that our own relatives are involved in either knowingly, perhaps unknowingly, and that community awareness building should be a critical focus of our intervention. Promoting safe, orderly, regular migration would provide positive and sustainable alternatives to countering TIP. The Global Compact for Migration is an important framework, and its implementation can have meaningful impact on global efforts for combating. Ninth, the coordinated international support is critically important, which is a major element of our topics today. With those few words, not so few words, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to end here saying that this seminar promises to be a very enlightening one, where we would be able to gather from our distinguished panelists what needs to be done. Much more needs to be done, because it's not only a crime, it's heart-wrenching when you see a person drowning in the Mediterranean. Those pictures do not bode well for our humanity. So we need to address this global menace, and we need to join hands to fight that. I thank you all, and before we move into our more important working session, let me invite you to join us for a cup of tea outside the room. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I kindly request you all to join us for a cup of tea and snacks just outside of the lobby.
Ladies and gentlemen, I once again welcome you all to today's working session. This time, the session will be moderated by Professor Dr. Tasneem Siddique, Department of Political Science, University of Dhaka. Distinguished audience, today's working session will commence with the presentation on human trafficking and smuggling of migrants, global and Bangladesh perspective by our colleague, Ms. Benuka Ferdowsi, Research Fellow of BIISS. The second presentation will be on preventing human trafficking and smuggling of migrants, challenges by Mr. Mohammad Obaidul Haq, Associate Professor, Department of International Relations, University of Dhaka. The third presentation will be on multilateral cooperation to prevent human trafficking and smuggling of migrants, global perspectives by Mr. Eugene Park, Program Manager of Migration and Protection Unit, IOM, Bangladesh, and the final presentation of today's working session will be on multilateral cooperation to prevent human trafficking and smuggling of migrants, Bangladesh perspective by Mr. Asif Munir, Migration and Displacement Specialist. Following that, the floor will be open for discussion. Thereafter, the moderator will make her concluding remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, may I now request Professor Dr. Tasneem.
And it is my pleasure. It's my pleasure to chair this session, which is a very important issue given the Bangladesh's migration scenario. Trafficking is one of the challenging area that different quarters within Bangladesh and also international, partners are trying hard to tackle. So promoting multilateral cooperation to prevent human trafficking and migrant smuggling, I think is very timely. And we also have amongst us, as we have heard, very knowledgeable presenters, and I'm very happy to learn from them and see how this whole debate has proceeded, and particularly multilateral cooperation. That is one area where many a time there are and others, but practical cooperation many a time actually hinders in different stages. So we think all of us will learn a lot from today's deliberation of these 4 presenters. So without any delay, I would like to first request our first presenter, Ms. Benuka Ferdowsi. She's from Bees, and she will be talking on human trafficking and smuggling of migrants, global and Bangladesh perspective. So, yeah.
Honorable Chief Guest of today's seminar, His Excellency Charles Whitley, respected Chairman of BISS, Ambassador Kazi Imtiaz Hussain PAA, respected Director General of BISS, Major General Muhammad Maqsudur Rahman, OSP, BSP, PSC, respected Chair of the working session, Professor Dr. Tasneem Siddique, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon to you all. My topic is human trafficking and migrant smuggling, global and Bangladesh perspective. Next. Well, basically, I will try to set the background of the working session. To do so, I will touch upon some WH questions to explore the nature of human trafficking and migrant smuggling, both at global and Bangladesh level. Then I will touch upon 2 things. First, the drivers of human trafficking and migrant smuggling, And second, security implications of these two crimes. From onwards in the presentation, I will use trafficking to mean human trafficking, and the term smuggling will be used for migrant smuggling. Next. Next. Let's start with the what question. What is human trafficking and migrant smuggling, and what is the difference between them? Though the two crimes are intertwined, they are distinct concepts. By definition, human trafficking is the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of people through force, fraud, deception, or abuse of vulnerability. On the other hand, migrant smuggling is facilitation of irregular entry in exchange of financial gain into a country where the migrant is not a national or resident. Thus, though both trafficking and smuggling may involve illegal movement of migrants, they are different. The movement in smuggling is voluntary, while in human trafficking, it is not. Smuggling is essentially transnational, while trafficking is not. In fact, ILO estimated that 77% of the trafficking victims are exploited within their own countries. To be more precise, victims of sex trafficking more likely face transnational human trafficking, while victims of forced labor typically experience exploitation in their country of residence. Primary motive of human traffickers is to gain from exploitation of the victims, while migrant smugglers eye to gain from fees for their quote-unquote services of facilitating irregular entry. Trafficking is involved with harm of persons, while smuggling poses challenges to state sovereignty and public order. Next slide. The harm aspect of trafficking is further reflected in the pattern of jobs done by trafficked persons, as can be seen from the slide. In the global survey in 2018, UNODC found 50% of the detected traffic victims to be engaged in sexual exploitation. 38% were engaged in forced labor and 6% were engaged in criminal activities. Please back to slide 3. However, as will be discussed later, the difference between human trafficking and migrant smuggling is not so stringent, and often these two crimes mix up. Next slide, please. Next, how many people are trafficked or smuggled each year? The amount is simply huge. UNODC found that in 2016, a minimum of 2.5 million migrants were smuggled globally. On the other hand, the Trafficking in Persons Report 2019, published by the United States Department of State, assumes the number of human trafficking victims to be around 24.9 million. However, it can be mentioned here that collection of data on trafficking and smuggling is quite challenging, as both are covert operations. For Bangladesh too, there is lack of reliable data on trafficking and smuggling. Some literature puts the figure for trafficking to be 3,000 annually, while others estimate it to be 20 to even 30,000 annually. Next slide. Now the who question. Who fall victim of trafficking and smuggling? One can notice a striking difference between trafficking and smuggling in this regard. For smuggling, majority of the victims are female, while overwhelming majority of trafficked persons are adult male. As can be seen in the right figure, 46% of detected trafficked persons are adult female and 20% are adult male. On the other hand, 80% of the persons smuggled along the routes of North America and Horn of Africa, as well as in other routes, are adult male. This trend is not surprising if one keeps in mind that majority of the trafficked persons are forcefully engaged in sexual exploitation. On the other hand, perilous journey of the smuggled migrants explain why majority of them are young male. The case of Bangladesh is not different from global pattern. It is we see that it is mainly female who are trafficked, and it is mainly young male who are smuggled. We see this in various reports and newspaper reports and other research papers in Bangladesh. Now, two major dynamics can be noticed in the global flow of trafficked persons. First, though adult female still comprises the largest share in traffic flow, their share is consistently declining. It was as high as 75% in 2004, which declined to 46% in 2018. Second, and more alarming thing, is the rising share of children, which rose from 16% in 2004 to 35% in 2018. Not surprisingly, the poorer the country, the higher the share of children in traffic flow. In case of smuggling too, a significant and growing number of unaccompanied minors, mostly boys, are being detected, particularly in Europe. In 2016, nearly 34,000 unaccompanied and separated children arrived in Greece, Italy, Bulgaria, and Spain. Sometimes they travel to join family members who are already in Europe. Other times they are sent ahead as pioneers of the family so that the other members can travel there following them. Next slide. Now, a few words about the profile of smugglers and traffickers and their organizational structures. Both of these groups are dominated by male, though in some areas the share of female is as high as 40%. But globally, the share of female is less than 50% everywhere in the world. Most smuggling networks are loosely connected based on fluid contacts, though there are a few sophisticated organized groups. UNODC did not find migrant smuggler groups to be systematically involved in other organized crimes. On the other hand, majority of traffic victims are trafficked by business enterprise-like structures. As you can see from the figure, the business type, enterprise type organizations involved in trafficking are accountable for 57% of the detected traffic person, and a broader, more organized groups which are termed as governance type account for 80%, and opportunistic association of individual traffickers, they account for 14%, and individual persons engaged in trafficking account for 11% of detected traffic persons. Next slide. Here is the map. You can see from where the trafficking flows go from where to where. We can see many areas as the origin areas. For example, the Africa and South Asia. And we see the major destinations, which include the North America and Europe, and also other regions. And you can see that a good portion of the trafficking flow is within the continent or within the area. As I said already, about 77% of the traffic flow happens within the region or within the country. Next slide, please. For South Asian countries, here is the list of major smuggling routes. These are land routes. You can see the highest number of persons are trafficked through the route of to North America from the south. Then land routes to Thailand from neighboring countries. Then Mediterranean sea routes, and you can also see the land routes of across African borders. These are the major routes of trafficking globally. Next slide. And this shows the flows of smuggling of migrants. Next slide, please. And this shows the flow of migrant smuggling from South Asia to other areas of the world. For South Asian countries, major routes of migrant smuggling are: one, from India through or via Russia to Russia via air, and then to Europe through Ukraine. The second major route runs through Central Asia or East Europe to Europe via land route or a combination of land and air route. And the third major route is goes through Turkey to Europe via land route. And another important route for migrant smuggling is Mediterranean sea routes. news of which we frequently find in the newspapers about sinking boats with migrants. Migrants who are smuggled from Bangladesh also follow these routes as is identified in the map and as I mentioned. Next slide, please. Now on the drivers. Traffickers target victims who are marginalized or in difficult circumstances. Undocumented migrants and people who are in desperate need of employment are also vulnerable, particularly to trafficking for forced labor. And criminals trafficking children target victims from extremely poor households, dysfunctional families, or those who are abandoned with no parental care. As you can see in a study, it was found that behind trafficking, 51% case of trafficking, in 51% case of trafficking, the driving factor was economic need. For 29% cases, it involved children who fall victim to trafficking as they live in dysfunctional family or without parental care. 13% people have been trafficked by their intimate partner. He or she may be their spouse or close friend or even relatives. And interestingly, 10% of the traffic persons have been, for 10% of the traffic person, the driver was their irregular status of migration, which made them fall victim to the trafficker's trap. And for migrant smuggling, you can see the drivers are stricter immigration rules, economic push factors in origin, segmented labor market in destination, and growth of sex tourism industry. I want to highlight on the third point, as long as there are segmented market in major destination countries, segmented market means there are jobs, their jobs are available there, which their people don't like to take up. So there is always a need of people who can be paid less and who can work under stressful situation. So that acts as a strong pull factor. So as long as this phenomena continues, this phenomena of segmented labor market in major destination countries, be it in Southeast Asia or in North America or Europe, the pull factor will remain strong. And this will ultimately drive a huge number of people to take up the path of trafficking and migrant smuggling. Next slide, please. Now I will be short. Security implications for, I will touch only major two issues. First one is human cost. We know though migrant smuggling involves consent of the migrant, it does not necessarily ends smoothly always. Many times the migrants fall victim to trafficking. They start as smuggled migrant, but they then turn to traffic person, and then again they may turn to smuggled migrants. And in this perilous journey, they face physical and torture. They face torture for ransom, and sometimes death also occur. Even the more upsetting thing is that there are reports that in some cases the smugglers willingly sabotage vehicles so that the boat sinks just near the shore, and so that the smuggled migrants can swim to the shore and can ask for asylum. So this is this has been the practice of a regular practice of some group, and which become deadly when if the smuggled persons don't know how to swim, or if the distance is high or the weather is rough. And they don't take care. Though they are providing service, they are saying that they are providing service in exchange of fees, I mean, they are facilitating people who are in desperate need of migration. But in reality, they don't take good care of them. They leave them on rubber boats without adequate food and water, and they have to pass the journey in an inhuman situation. Though not, I mean, the human cost is huge, and it is not. I mean, mere the number of deaths, though the number of deaths is also quite high, but only the number of deaths does not reflect the total human cost. The human cost is more severe. And next, I will touch upon the issues of nexus among human trafficking, migrant smuggling, and other organized crimes. Though usually migrant smuggling groups are not always, I mean, not systematically involved in organized crimes, but the nexus takes place in many occasions. And the vicious circle of the, I mean, vicious nexus of human traffickers, migrant smugglers, and organized crime groups has become a threat for countries around the world. The EU is concerned as destination country, and origin countries like Bangladesh are also concerned, as it brings a huge suffering for its people. Okay, I will end there. So I think I have tried my best to set the background of the working session. Now we will see how we can prevent those with multilateral cooperation. With that, I would like to thank you all for your patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Benuka Ferdowsi. You have definitely set the context very well. And it is like, you know, it is a very deep-rooted problem. And you have shown the global picture of trafficking. And while doing so, I think you have also touched upon trafficking and the difference between trafficking and human smuggling. And human smuggling, if you really try to concentrate, that there is always a very thin line between human smuggling, trafficking, as well as labor trafficking. So these are all so much mixed up in the whole, you know, at the end, you just can't say this is labor trafficking, this is human smuggling, this is trafficking. I think you have brought that issue very nicely. And another thing that, you know, I got from your presentation is that the routes and, you know, the way the recruiters operate in all three cases, they change very quickly. Very quickly, they just maybe they are using this India route today. Tomorrow, you will see they are using, you know, Dubai route. And then again, they are using whichever, wherever the immigration and others are strong, they'll start the whole business from somewhere else. And it doesn't have to be always an organized group of traffickers. Within months, within 7 days, a new trafficking group can emerge. Just think of the whole issue of, you know, 2014-13, all these Bangladeshis in Thailand, and there were no traffickers in the beginning. But then within months, there are all organized trafficking groups in Chattogram, Cox's Bazar. So this is very difficult to channel. You know, the challenges are very difficult to face. Now, I think we are going to listen to Mr. Muhammad Obaidul Haq, Department of International Relations, University of Dhaka. He will tell us prevention of human trafficking and smuggling of migrants, prevention challenges. I think very much we are into there now. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Honorable Chief Guest who has just left us, Honorable Chairman of BASE, Ambassador Qazi Imtiaz Hussain, and Honorable DG, Major General Muhammad Maqsudur Rahman. Thank you for inviting me here today to share my thoughts on the challenges of preventing human trafficking and smuggling of migrants. Thank you. The UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime and its protocols have identified both trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants as crime. While both have some similarities in nature, trafficking in persons is a crime against an individual, while smuggling of migrants is a crime against a state. The nature of human trafficking differs from other crimes in that it is a transnational organized crime. That is why transnational cooperation needs special consideration in successfully combating this crime. In recent times, we have witnessed hundreds of Bangladeshi nationals becoming victims of either trafficking in persons or migrant smuggling syndicates in several countries, including Libya, Tunisia, Malta, and Bosnia-Herzegovina. The government of Bangladesh has expressed its firm commitment in combating human trafficking and migrant smuggling. However, this commitment must translate into meaningful change on the ground. My task here today is to shed light on some of the challenges in this regard. There is little disagreement that in order to stamp out the curse of human trafficking, a concerted effort is needed from different actors, including all levels of the government, development partners, civil society organizations, and all other relevant actors, including the law enforcement agencies. First and foremost challenge in this regard is the capacity of these actors to prevent, protect, and prosecute these crimes. We are living in a challenging time. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the way the transnational criminal syndicates involved in these crimes operate. The war in Ukraine is likely to add even newer dimensions to these dynamics. Loss of jobs due to COVID-19 pandemic has given rise to desperation among potential migrants. The human trafficking and smuggling syndicates tapped this vulnerability. Increased exposure to different social media during the pandemic has also affected the way the smugglers operate. It has become easier for them to recruit the potential victims without getting to them physically. Women and children are thought to be more vulnerable in this regard. Many suspect that a rise in child marriages during the pandemic is also associated with incidences of trafficking in persons. Tackling these newer challenges successfully will require an increase in capacity building efforts at all levels: prevention, protection, and prosecution. Given the nature of these crimes, international efforts and transnational cooperation are essential in order to meet these challenges. The Constitution of Bangladesh provides guarantee against against trafficking and smuggling, albeit indirectly. Article 32 of Bangladesh Constitution guarantees the protection of right to life and personal liberty, which the offense of human trafficking badly violates. Article 34 of the Constitution prohibits all forms of forced labor, which is almost always the consequence of human trafficking. In the legal arena, as we have seen in the morning, Bangladesh has done well as far as enacting laws to prevent human trafficking is concerned. The Prevention and Suppression of Human Trafficking Act 2012 was promulgated with a view to preventing human trafficking, ensure the protection of victims of human trafficking, secure their rights, and ensure safe migration. However, when it comes to its implementation, there have been many challenges. Foremost was to build an appropriate institutional framework. So far, as we have heard from the previous presenter, one of the previous presenters, only 7 special tribunals have been constituted, that too only in divisional headquarters, which are not necessarily the most trafficking prone areas of the country. Capacity building of the criminal justice actors to address trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants has also been an issue. Specialized training for judicial actors and institutional capacity building for the smooth functioning of the special tribunals is needed. There have been demands from the recruiting agencies for reform of the Act, in their words, to end harassments against them due to misuse of the Anti-Trafficking Act by law enforcing agencies. Now, this brings for another challenge, the capacity building of the law enforcement agencies in differentiating diverse migrant situations. This has become more pertinent given that we are increasingly facing cases of mixed migration, as Professor Tasneem Siddiqui has just pointed out, using the same routes and channels in these challenging times. The routes that smugglers use to transport refugees and migrant workers across borders illegally are being increasingly used by traffickers today. The challenges we face today in tackling human trafficking and migrant smuggling are vast and complex. In order to address these multifaceted challenges, we need to focus on developing capacities in fields as diverse as child trafficking, forced labor, sexual exploitation, and even money laundering and cyber crime. Another problem that stakeholders working in combating these crimes face is lack of dependable data. Despite a visible increase in cases of human trafficking, crime statistics reflect a low number of the incidents of human trafficking. This may have happened due to reasons relating to inability of the law enforcers to differentiate between different types of forced migrants during the screening process after they're rescued. Professor Tasneem Siddiqui has also shed some light on that. The difficulty, the subtleties, the previous speaker has defined, the differences, delineated the differences between these different groups. But then again, in reality, the differences are so subtle, and with meager training and very little knowledge, the law enforcing agencies often have difficulty, in identifying who is who. So the screening process is very important. So that could be one of the reasons, why they don't show up in the statistics, the number of victims of trafficking and smuggling of migrants. These results in many cases of trafficked in persons remaining unreported or underreported. So what are the ways forward? So these are some of the challenges that I just discussed. So the ways forward, a two-pronged strategy needs to be developed and adhered to, preventive as well as responsive. In any initiative to combat the trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants, the victims need to be put in the center. The government and other stakeholders, including civil society groups, need to focus their efforts on advancing rights-based approaches to prevent exploitation of individuals by trafficking networks. To combat the scourge of trafficking in persons, all stakeholders must join hands and work together. As we have seen, the challenges put forward by the COVID-19 pandemic and now the Ukraine war has made the potential migrants even more vulnerable. Desperation induced by closure of formal migration channels calls for special attention on potential migrants, especially those who have been forced to return, so that they have adequate information and institutional access to counter recruitment approaches from traffickers. The presence of a large number of Rohingya refugees in the country, stuck in a quagmire of uncertainty as to their future, make them potential victims of trafficking. Special measures need to be put in place to make them aware of potential dangers of being trafficked. Giving the victims a voice by way of creating platforms to share their experiences can add a lot of weight to the awareness campaign. The survivors of trafficking, having been direct victims, have better understanding and knowledge of the implications of trafficking. Therefore, their voices are invaluable in finding and implementing anti-trafficking actions and policies. Recent discovery that social media like TikTok had been used to entice a large number of adolescent and young women to be trafficked from Bangladesh to India for sexual exploitation has increased the importance of monitoring the digital media to prevent such crimes. On the judicial front, the special tribunals have to be made proactive and visible. The tribunals need to be strengthened in order to effectively prosecute the traffickers. Despite the existence of necessary legal apparatus, there seems to be a disconnect between our policies on paper and our actions on the ground. Repatriation and rehabilitation of trafficking victims needs to be given due importance. All sorts of supports for the returned victims, health, both physical and mental, financial, legal, and livelihood, among others, need to be ensured. Law enforcers and other stakeholders dealing with the victims need to be sensitized so that a victim is not doubly victimized. Developing a central data repository or database with access to the relevant stakeholders needs to be given utmost importance. Government regulation to promote safe migration is noteworthy and commendable, but it needs monitoring and periodic assessment to see if it is working well in the changed circumstances. Given that the migration landscape is changing rapidly, with a change in geopolitical as well as technological landscapes, all of us need to work harder and together to keep pace with the changes and keep our migrants safe. Thank you.
It is always a pleasure listening to Ohchr. It was a very good presentation. So I would add with you when you were discussing the multiple challenges of trafficking victims and also drivers, multiple drivers. I would say climate change is one area now one has to look very carefully, because when our studies have shown that during this 14-15 crisis, mass graves and others, 66% of them were from climate affected areas. Then again, this new episode of 26 death, you see another in their case as well, around, I don't remember correctly, 68 or 70% of those victims were climate affected areas. So therefore, if you think of COVID-19 and climate change, what happened during COVID-19 2020, 5 consecutive disasters Bangladesh faced. And that is the time, although internationally at that point of time, not very many trafficking cases, but then internally, there were a lot of cases of trafficking, because those who were displaced, if you just go through data, that by 2050, 40 million people will be displaced in South Asia alone, and 20 million of that will be from Bangladesh. This is a World Bank sort of modeling study. And therefore, I think prevention and other things when we are discussing, we have to keep in mind in multiple stresses, which is resulting in this type of endeavors. Now, we would like to listen to our next speaker, Miss Eugene Park. She has done a lot of work on trafficking and, on this particular area, and multilateral cooperation. That is the title of today's discussion. So we are going to listen about compact and other multilateral institutions, as well as multilateral cooperation in different channels. Thank you so much. Please proceed. Sorry, Miss Eugene, I should introduce properly. Program Manager of Migration and Protection Unit, International Organization for Migration, Bangladesh.
Thank you. Ambassador Qazi Imtiaz Hussain, the chairman of BIIS, and Honorable Major General Muhammad Makstur Marhaman, the Director General of BIISS, and distinguished participants and my fellow speakers. Very Nice to meet you all, and good afternoon all. So today, as Madam introduced, my name is Eugene. I'm currently working as acting program manager in IOM Bangladesh. It's really my honor to speak at this the seminar on the topic of multilateral cooperation to prevent human trafficking and smuggling of migrants and global perspectives. Next. So before I start my presentation, I want to present this research paper. This basically shows what is happening at a global level. So this, the global estimate of modern slavery, it was conducted by IOM, ILO, and the Ohchr Foundation in 2017. This provides the recent and the comprehensive global estimates of modern slavery so far. So although this is not specifically speaking about trafficking and smuggling per se, but this modern slavery term, which is frequently used as umbrella term, it encompasses all the situations of exploitation, not only about the human trafficking, but also other forms of exploitations, which does not necessarily involve trafficking, but severely violating human rights and human dignity. Next. So what does this research tell us? I just want to start this presentation by showing the global the situations. So there were 14 million people who were trapped in modern slavery situation in 2016, and there were 6 adult victims of modern slavery for every 1,000 adults globally, and the 4.4 child victims for every 1,000 children. And then women and girls accounted for almost 70% of total victims. That's what our previous speakers mentioned as well. So now that we've witnessed the COVID-19, which have certainly exacerbated the vulnerability of people to the risks of human trafficking, other exploitation, and also smuggling, I just wanted to bring the focus back on this, the importance of multilateral cooperation. So trafficking, smuggling, and exploitation is not happening only in certain area or certain country or certain people. So this is a global problem. It's affecting everyone, every country, which requires everyone's commitment and efforts and the multilateral collaboration. Next. So now I want to start with a global normative framework. So I want to zoom out a little bit. So to understand what is the existing global instruments that define human trafficking, smuggling, and exploitation, and how international cooperation is enshrined in such the instrument as a guiding framework for us. Next. So human trafficking and exploitations have been expressed in the multiple legal documents at international level throughout the history, even before the Palermo Protocols were introduced, which is the most foundational legal instrument concerning the human trafficking and smuggling. So these are some examples of the legal documents and instruments. So we have a UN Convention for Suppression of the Trafficking Person and the Exploitation of the Prostitution of Others. And there is an International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which prohibits a number of the practices related to trafficking, slavery, and other forms of exploitation. We also have a CRC, which prohibits the trafficking of children. And there's also different ILO conventions talking about the forced labor. And there's also CEDAW. Next. And then in 2000, the UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime was adopted with the 3 supplementing protocols. And we have a trafficking protocol and also smuggling focused protocols. So this trafficking protocol is for the first time that provided the universally agreed upon definition of trafficking in person that we are talking about now. And it also addresses the human trafficking as a crime that including all forms of exploitation and all types of victims. And it also seeks to balance law enforcement approach as well as protecting the rights of the victims and also international cooperations as well. Next. And now I want to also briefly touch upon this OHCHR recommended principles and guidelines on human rights and human trafficking. This is also really important document because it also highlights the protection related to human rights of the trafficking victims and what are the protection needs of these the victims of human trafficking. So if we look at the evolution of how global normative framework has evolved and its focuses, we can see that over the past decades, the global perspective is putting more emphasis on the rights of victims and protection and balancing with the law enforcement centric the response. And additionally, the focus of the counter trafficking in person has broadened. So moving from women exclusively to include all people, and from prostitution exclusively to nearly all forms of exploitation. Next. And more recently, the Global Compact on Migration, adopted in 2018, understands the looks at the human trafficking and migrant smuggling issues in a larger context of migration, bringing different level of stakeholders together in a more holistic manner. So GCM basically promotes a safe and orderly and the regular migration, covering all dimensions of international migration in a comprehensive manner. And under within its 23 objectives, it specifically has the 2 objectives concerning the smuggling of migrants and also preventing trafficking and in the context of international migration. Next. And now I want to quickly touch upon then what are the institutions who facilitate international cooperation under this anti-trafficking global normative design, and who supports this implementation of the global framework. So we have a UN, of course, a UNODC is the guardian of the UNTOC and the supplementing protocols, and also IOM, we are also working tirelessly on the counter-trafficking projects, and also protecting the vulnerable migrants, upholding migrants' rights. And also ILO also is advocating for the labor migrants' rights. And also we have OHCHR, which is the guardian of the human rights issues. And of course, we cannot forget about the states who are actually playing a key role in implementing such global the framework, and also the advancing the national framework to be in line with the global standards. Next. Next. Then now I want to present how the multilateral cooperation is actually happening in this domain of counter trafficking and the migrant smuggling at the international as well as some regional level aspects. Next. So the Bali process can be the most famous and well-known example of such international platform. So it was established in 2002 and it has 49 member states, including IOM, UNODC, UNHCR, and ILO, and other observing countries and the organizations. So this platform basically facilitates multilateral cooperation and information sharing about the issues related to migrant smuggling, human trafficking, and other transnational crimes. And there are different working groups under Bali process. For example, there's a working group on human trafficking in persons, and also working group disrupting the smuggling and trafficking network. So through these working groups, different countries, member states, and the organizations get together, and then they discuss new trends and cross-border cooperations, investigations, and best practices to enhance counter-trafficking and counter-migrant smuggling responses. Next. And I also wanted to touch upon some regional platform. The SARC, the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, and also ASEAN, which is Association of Southeast Asian the nations. So these two, the regional platform, it is basically they are formed it to facilitate some facilitate the regional cooperations and strengthen the joint responses and the collaboration on important key areas. And one of the key areas is actually on the countering human trafficking. So they both, the SARC and the ASEAN has its convention on the preventing human trafficking. So this shows how this is an important example of multilateral cooperation, how different countries, neighboring countries get join their hands and to set the regional priorities and to cooperate through such platforms. Next. And as the ambassador really briefly mentioned, I want to show some of the global the counter-trafficking projects and the protection projects that IOM is also working on. So GLOACT is one of them. It's implemented in the Asia and the Middle East mainly, and with UNODC and IOM, we are working on across the 3 pillars: prevention and protection and prosecution. So this project mainly looks into building the capacity of the cross-border collaboration, the prosecution efforts, and also working on the protection component as well to facilitate the development of the proper the referral mechanisms so that the vulnerable migrants or victims can be referred to appropriate protection service providers. Next. And the Protasha, this one is not a global project, is the Bangladesh project funded by the EU and implemented by IOM in partnership with BRAC. I thought that this is also a good example of multilateral cooperation. It has a different components, but specifically under the reintegration part, IOM provides the protection and reintegration support to returnees who returned it through the readmission program between the EU and Bangladesh government, which is in short often called as SOP. So this is an example like how this project is linking this SOP with the protection support for sustainable reintegration of these vulnerable returning migrants. Next. And also globally, IOM is managing the assisted voluntary return and reintegration program. This is also the supporting those stranded migrants or vulnerable migrants who doesn't have any means to go back to their home. So IOM is supporting their return and reintegration. Next. And just 2 more slides. I just wanted to also highlight the key emerging area, which is a private sector engagement, given that many migrant workers are exposed to the risks of trafficking or smuggling during their labor migration journey. And now the due diligence for human rights is no longer an option for many corporates. Now it's becoming a legal obligation with the advent of this different acts. For example, California Transparency in Supply Chain Act, UK Modern Slavery, and the many are underway. So IOM is also working in this the private sector engagement. We have IRIS, which is to promote ethical recruitment for governments and also the recruitment agencies and corporates. And the CREST, the corporate responsibility of eliminating slavery and trafficking. It also supports the companies to assess their supply chain to where are the vulnerable points and also establish grievances mechanisms for the vulnerable migrant workers and protect exploited victims. And next, and lastly, very important topic, data. As a previous speaker mentioned, data is widely recognized as one of the challenges in counter-trafficking response. So this counter-trafficking data collaborative, the CTDC, where IOM is also contributing its own trafficking related data. It was launched in November 2017. And the goal of the CTDC is basically to remove the information sharing the barriers and equip the counter-trafficking actors, whoever they are, with the updated, reliable data on human trafficking so that they can formulate the evidence-based the programming or policy. So this is basically to bring the global data in one platform and strengthen and empower local, national, international institutions to work on eradicating this crime of the trafficking and exploitation. Okay, that's the next. I think that's the end of, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Eugene Park. I think you have taken us through a large pool of framework that exists at a global level. And also you try to link it, how it's operationalized in the context of Bangladesh. One thing I am a bit provoked to say is that trafficking is something, it's there, and international community and Bangladeshi community for quite a while trying to redress the issue, prevention and others. But if you think the way we could prevent or reduce this whole, terrorist attack and other things, the way the level of conviction we showed at one point, and we could more or less get away in many ways this whole situation of vulnerability. But think of trafficking, I would say that type of conviction is yet to emerge in the context of trafficking. That is why you do see that it is persisting for a while. If I just mention last 3-4 days newspaper, or from the 8th, the newspaper and this whole thing, 14 Bangladeshis in Kyrgyzstan, and they have this BMET clearance, smart card and everything, and now they are stuck there. We know the name of the recruiting agencies, we know the name of the dalals, and it has happened each and every time. We know who have done it, but even then, the legal prosecution and others doesn't work that way. That is in the Bangladeshi context, and also in the international context, same kind of, I would say, laws and others are there, but maybe time has come for asking for real conviction to make it happen. So I would ask others as well to reflect on this issue after so many things, why things doesn't change. That is an important area of, creating or developing our demand, how to stop this. So may I now request Mr. Asif Munir to talk on multilateral cooperation to prevent human trafficking and smuggling of migrants, again, Bangladesh perspective. And Mr. Asif Munir is migration expert, and he has been working on different refugee, labor migration, trafficking for quite a while. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And I think what I was thinking when I was trying to prepare for today was that how do I supplement, because I think the panel here are quite close to the top, similar aspects that they would be covering. And perhaps my one would supplement what my IOM colleague was talking about here. Next slide, please. So the focus is on multilateral cooperation. So there's no definition as such, but just to kind of reflect on what we understand by multilateral cooperation, refers to a relationship between two or more states with a common interest, but without any discrimination among them in terms of their roles. It requires cooperation activities to be developed using an intermediary such as UN agencies. And my IOM colleague talked about the framework, particularly for human trafficking, UNODC's role, role of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, role that IOM and ILO plays, also the role of the state, and also importantly, particularly when I'd be talking about Bangladesh, the role of RCPs, the regional consultative process, in this case, Bali process, also SARC and ASEAN. I wouldn't be talking much about SARC and ASEAN, especially in the Bangladesh context. For SARC, we haven't seen much, although the instruments are there, but in terms of active implementation for preventing human trafficking, we haven't seen role of SARC as such in recent years. So I will not be talking about that, but very briefly, I would talk about Bali process, just to supplement what Ms. Eugene, you were talking about. Next slide, please. And then I wouldn't go into detail of the 2 slides that's next, because Eugene has given a comprehensive normative framework. So this is actually, you can move to the next slide also, because it's similar to what she has presented. And next slide, please. So there are the UN instruments, ILO instruments, the Palermo Protocol, and the other optional protocols, ILO conventions. I haven't added GCM here, but of course that's also there. So just not to repeat, I will move on to the next slide, please. So that's the framework. What I would like to focus on, because this hasn't come up so far today as well, within the UN system, the Universal Periodic Review. And within that, the first review for Bangladesh was in 2018. And in the reporting mechanism, this is due for 2023. And 2023 is also our election year. So perhaps Bangladesh would have to negotiate in terms of the report. It's quite a rigorous process. I think it starts from March 2023 and goes on up to October, November during 2023. So a lot of preparatory work. And some of the things that has come up from the concluding observations of the Universal Periodic Review of Bangladesh. One of the aspects related to human trafficking was that there was a strong agreement both by the Bangladesh government delegation, which was in the final round, was led by the Honorable Minister for Law and Parliamentary Affairs. And the issue that the implementation of the PSHTA Act 2012 and the National Plan of Action that many of the previous speakers were talking about. I just stop here for a minute. My apologies that I didn't address the esteemed the ambassador and the Director General, and also the other panelists and participants. Good afternoon to you all. I straight went into my presentation. Apologies for that. I acknowledge your presence and your patient hearing. Thank you. So in terms of the Universal Periodic Review, so that's one of the things that Bangladesh will have to report back on in 2023, that since 2018, how far the Act has been implemented and how far the National Plan of Action has been implemented. So that's one of the aspects. The other is about the allocation of sufficient resources to implement it. We're just coming into the national budget round. Many of you who are following this issue on human trafficking and the resources, particularly for the Ministry of Home Affairs, as well as the special units that look after on human trafficking, including the CID and other departments, what is the resource allocation has been to implement that? Because quite often we also hear that some of the major plans that the government has in different sectors are not implemented fully, not because there's no intention, but sometimes either human resources or financial resources are not enough. And when we're talking about something that's cross-border, transnational, it involves a lot of logistics and resources. And also the effective implementation of the 5-year plan. So Bangladesh is now in the 8th 5-year plan, and that is also been discussed. And the Bangladesh government agreed that yes, in terms of human trafficking as well, what needs to be done, it's mentioned in the 8th 5-year plan, and that needs to be implemented as well. Next slide, please. So very briefly, what's in the 8th 5-year plan? We know about the National Plan of Action, but the macro development framework, the 8th 5-year plan, what does it have in terms of what needs to be done to address human trafficking? Where of course, multilateral cooperation would be important, and also adhering to the reporting mechanism for the different UN conventions, including the Universal Periodic Report. So the national priority under governance, this is mentioned and linked to SDG 16.2.2. The expectation to reduce the number of victims and increase prosecution. So using the 2012 Act, so that is the government intention in the 8th 5-year plan, reducing the number of victims and increase prosecution of human smugglers as well as human traffickers. Public Security Division has been formed within the Ministry of Home Affairs to address the crimes under the Act 2012 and also the implementation of the National Plan of Action. This unit, the PSD, plays a critical role in enforcement of legal provisions, including the Migrants Act 2013 and the PSHTA Act 2012, to make mobility of people, migration and migrants safer. So safer migration so that human smuggling can be addressed. The PSD is to increase capacity of law enforcing agencies, border forces, and the counter-trafficking committees. Now, those who are working on the ground, we're aware that these counter-trafficking committees, which are mandated at the different levels, district, upazila, and union, in many cases, these are not very active. So there are small initiatives by different development partners and NGOs to make them active, but it hasn't been so much. And the issue, especially when we're talking about GCM and other instruments coming, and we talked about that issue of migrant smuggling, human trafficking, these terminologies, trafficking in persons, which is used by the US State Department, issue of uniformity and alignment in response. That would be probably required because when the 8th five-year plan was drafted, to look into how these emerging instruments can be utilized. The next slide, please. So Eugene, you talked about the Bali process, and as you mentioned, it began in 2002. So this year, it's observing its 20th year. So in the 20 years, just a very snapshot of a critical look at the Bali process. So you've talked about the composition, who are the members, observers, and all of that. So I'm not going to that. But the issue of non-binding nature, it's a consultative process, right? It's a regional consultative process. So how far has it worked? That needs to be analyzed, especially in the last 20 years or so, particularly for the Bali process. It hasn't had a very formal structure as such, like the Colombo process, but especially in 2014 and 15, we have seen, especially when the Andaman Sea crisis happened, there was much talk about regional cooperation and including the Bali process and the compliance to international laws. So a lot of the instruments that the list of instruments, the normative framework, not even when we're talking about this region and even in Bangladesh, we haven't acceded to all the international instruments. So how does it work? And especially if we're talking at the Bali process level, issue of compliance to the international law, how would that really work? That needs to be looked at in terms of the last 20 years. And also then again, the alignment with GCM, not only GCM, the Global Compact on Refugees, and the different national plans of actions of the different countries in this region, South Asia and Southeast Asia, including Bangladesh, alignment of these new elements. So the national plans of actions, but both GCM and the Global Compact on Refugees. The shifting of priorities in regionalism, that's also taking place. I'm aware of the time. I'll be trying to conclude in 2 minutes, perhaps. And then also the geopolitical challenges. And previous speakers have mentioned about the COVID-19, but also we're obviously aware of changes in Myanmar, whether it's the Rohingya refugees, but also the military takeover in Myanmar, changes in Afghanistan, and very recently changes in Sri Lanka. That would have geopolitical challenges, even for human trafficking as well. We need to bear that in mind in terms of days ahead. I also question about the institutional memory, because when we go into the website of the Bali process, it's not updated in terms of a lot of the work that has been going on. Of course, the records of the meetings are there, but in terms of studies and different reports and the learning of exchanges between the members of the Bali process, that's not so much visible or publicly available. Issue of geopolitical interest, especially if we think about the Andaman crisis at that time. And I would particularly mention about Australia, with due respect to Australia. Australia at that time was very worried that this move through the Andaman Sea, whether they would want to land up in Australia. And there were massive information campaigns planned around that time, soon after 2015. especially from the government of Australia, to prevent people moving towards irregular movement towards Australia. But at the same time, in the last couple of years, we've seen in the media, there have been fiction serial made based on true stories of detention centers in some of the islands of Australia. And we've seen reports of Bangladeshis in inhuman conditions in some of these detention centers who may have wanted to enter Australia, but over a long period of time, not necessarily in 2015. So the issue of xenophobia of certain countries or continents with regard to human mobility. And last but not least, the effectiveness of track 2 dialogue and diplomacy. That also needs to be explored or reviewed in terms of the last 20 years of the Bali process. The last slide, I would end with a positive note in terms of, again, we see our colleague from UNODC is here, and we have mentioned several times about the GLOW Act, the potential for success. So just a snapshot of, in recent years, what the GLOW Act has been able to achieve. And because it's a transnational crime, it's very important that there's international actors, law enforcing agencies, intelligence agencies, states, they come together and play a collective role. And we have seen good results of that. One of them is in 2019, one of the Bangladeshi human smugglers was actually apprehended, who was very much involved in the irregular movement towards US. And also in March, Interpol coordinated an operation called Operation Stormmakers, which triggered 121 arrests in 25 countries, helped rescue 80 trafficking victims, and also 2,400 irregular migrants, who are mostly from Asia. So that's one particular initiative, GLOW Act, but similar initiatives where agencies like Interpol or other cross-border security agencies can play an important role. This collaboration through multilateralism is very much required in that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Asif Nazrul. I think, Asif Munir, sorry about that. So I think your last point, I think GLOW Act and how practical kinds of interventions, I think that is where one has to look now. And, the way you saw Bali process, and that is also very important. And then how actors behave, that whether they will be on their shore, that is a major concern, rather than reducing trafficking in general through a right-based approach. I think this right-based approach is very much lacking when it comes to trafficking and human smuggling discourse. It is mainly victim, not survivor. That is the thought process. And it's not the sustainable development the way it wants to make inclusive and participatory. I think trafficking discourse now, I think it's time to be more participated by the survivors and think of solutions. So I think we have listened to very good 4 presentations. Now it is time for us to have an open sort of discussion session. We are very happy that not only we have participants inside this room, it is a hybrid conference seminar, and we have a lot of participants who are participating through online. So I would request participants both from the floor as well as those who have joined us online to reflect and ask questions and provide your input. So the floor is open. Yes, I kindly introduce yourself and then
Thank you, madam. So my name is Mahdi Hassan. I'm the head of Human Trafficking and Smuggling of Migrants Unit, UNODC in Bangladesh. So I'm so happy to be here today. And I would like to thank and congratulate BIISS for this excellent seminar. And I would like to mention here, perhaps in the history of Bangladesh, this is the second national level discussion on smuggling of migrants. That's why I'm so happy. Last year, UNODC organized one national level consultation with the parliamentarians specifically on the smuggling of migrants. Perhaps other will discuss a lot of things on trafficking issues, but I will focus on the smuggling of migrants. I'm so happy, and I have been very enriched with the discussions from the knowledgeable speakers since morning. So I will not focus on the general discussion. I will directly go to some of the technical issues where we need to focus from Bangladesh. So today we are discussing about the promotion of multilateral cooperation. So if I only talk about the smuggling of migrants from the lens of multilateral cooperation, it means we need the cooperation with the other countries where we have the problem, or where we have the common problem. Like Asif Bhai also mentioned some of the point on these, that we need multilateral cooperation with other countries. So before starting my sharing my thought on one question, we know that trafficking and smuggling both are crimes, but smuggling of migrants is a crime in Bangladesh? The answer is no. Why? Because we have not recognized this as a crime in Bangladesh with the national legislation, and it creates problem. Because to respond this transnational crime, we need to use the Mutual Legal Assistance tool. We have enacted Bangladesh Mutual Legal Assistance Act 2012, where there is a provision that we are not able to cooperate with other countries with an issue which is not a crime in Bangladesh. So to adjudicate this crime, investigation is very important. So to investigate by the investigating officers, collecting evidence, collecting intelligence is very important. And it is not possible to be confined within the border of the country. They need cooperation with other countries, and we know that it is not very easy. So in this situation, what is the solution? Number one, this smuggling of migrants should be recognized as a crime in Bangladesh with the national legislation. Number two, to have the cooperation with other countries, Bangladesh needs to ratify the UN protocol against smuggling of migrants. So we understand that what is the importance of having national legislation on smuggling of migrants, but let's talk about the importance of ratification. So we know that in the morning, just the first speaker was discussing that smuggling protocol ratifying state numbers is more than 100. So if Bangladesh also ratify that protocol, it means under this protocol, automatically Bangladesh can start cooperation on this. At first, it will be the first response to get the cooperation, multilateral cooperation. Second, when we have the Bangladesh national legislation, then we can also take the advantage of the international cooperation, multilateral cooperation from the criminal justice aspect. So these are two my broad recommendations Bangladesh can consider and should work on this. Thank you everyone for your patience listening.
Thank you. Thank you. We have one participant online, Dear R&A. Mr. Oh, now he's no longer there. Director R&A. Oh, Director R&A. I don't think he's here anymore, but his hand, is there anyone? Yes, please, Rashid Alam.
Thank
Just, I'll come to you.
Okay, sure.
Someone already, Rashid Alam, can you speak? And then we will go to.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, he's here.
He's connected? Yeah.
He's here.
Okay.
Major General Rashidul Haq. Please.
Shahidul Haq, yes. Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. I am Major General Shahidul Haq. I was former ambassador to Libya from 2014 to 2016. My observation and also the question is based on my experience in this during this period. One of the things is that which I face a problem, and that, you know, I got when I was there, I got some of our migrants who had passports that passport didn't belong to them. Photograph is not theirs. Visa is not there, but he is in Tripoli. And he flew from both our airports. This is number one. I don't know how they did it. And this is not in one case. There are a number of cases. Number two observation is that I personally, there is a volumes of, as Professor Siddiqui has said, that yes, we have sent numbers, addresses, and individuals to different people from RAB to intelligence unit of police and also the different agencies. But unfortunately, yes, RAB did a very good job, especially RAB 3, RAB 1, and Chittagong, there is another RAB 7 possibly. They did very good job. Also, Economic Intelligence Unit possibly in police headquarters, they also did the very good job. But you know, there's hundreds of cases such, I mean, is there. But we have been telling them who are doing it, how they are doing it, and the routes they are following. I mean, this is it's terrible. And this is, I repeat, this is still going on. As we are talking, it is still going on. And during my time, there's one thing that government has banned. At that time, it banned labor market into Libya. But at this moment, when we are talking, government is open. Why is the situation remained the same? Only last week, there was about to be third bout of civil war in Libya when one of the rival prime minister wanted to enter Tripoli, where they had already a prime minister. So in this scenario, there is no industry, nothing, but still we have opened the market. And all those people who are going to Libya, they are all going for Europe. And I can assure you, and I mean, the cycle is vicious cycle. I mean, and it all started from in Dhaka, Chittagong, and there are certain districts. I can name those districts where are these from where these migrants are going. I mean, they are recruited, how they are recruited. So, I mean, actually, this list it's a very long story. I wish I could share with you, but my request to you, because Madam and also I have seen Mr. Asif, you work with such a thing. I'll request you, if you can impress upon the concerned authority to have a single stop agency where embassies and these poor people can contact them and get the help. This is number one. Number two is that the attention, I mean, what we get, I mean, especially the migrant workers, they get vis-a-vis the remittance we get is not same. I had tremendous problem in sending the dead bodies from Libya, which were there for more than 3 years. And I cannot express, I cannot, tell you how the condition of those dead bodies were. I mean, air condition was not there, freezer was not there, and they were lying there. So the attention given to the migrant workers vis-a-vis the, what is it called, remittance we get, this should be addressed. At least we should take care of those people who are actually, really, they really work hard. And lastly, I'll also, through you, I'd like to request you that whenever we open market or study market, please look, first we should see whether that economy has got those parameters to take migrant workers or not. And lastly, with the observation, the migration, train migration hasn't stopped anywhere in the world. Everybody, there's a tremendous potential for train migrants. But unfortunately, we are not sending train migrants. We are sending all, raw, and they even don't know how to do, and they don't know why they are there. But we are not, also there are a lot of potentialities to send doctors, nurses, engineers, but we are not interested in sending them. That's the problem. Thank you very much, madam.
Thank you. Sorry.
Said that to combat this type of trafficking, we know that from where the money is going, who are getting the monies. We don't have even the database of the crime people. So that's why we couldn't stop it. I always said that probably politically we don't want to stop it. The former ambassador, what he was mentioning. And if you see another landscapes, if you see the Bangladesh, on 3 sides we have India, and all the 3 sides our girls are trafficked to India. And another side there is Myanmar. From there, the Rohingyas are coming to Bangladesh, and they are now trafficking to all of the problems. So that's becoming another major problem for us, that the Rohingyas, how they are being trafficked, and Bangladeshi girls are also been there. So how to deal with this problem? I don't think this is rocket science. It's really possible if we really want to stop this. Just Iran cases I can share you. When I was made some report that the trafficking was Iran is happening, the CID just tried to identify who are getting the money. They just arrested 3 people and whole the chain was broken. So we need to see that our former ambassador said that everybody know that without permission, Bangladesh is in top 3rd in Libya. Now our government has decided that we send people to Libya officially. So see that in this crisis, I think all of the academic discussion we did, but on practical, I think all of the government agencies, ministries, everyone, we need to be aligned. Because when Bangladesh is in the list of the country of Iraq, Afghanistan, top 3, it doesn't, when European colleagues say that you are going to declare you are a middle income country and your people are always want to come this way with Iran and Afghanistan, what's the problem? So I think that we all need to work together, and of course, it should be promoting multilateral corporations. Without this, I think it's never be going to solve of this problem. Thank you all for hearing.
Thank you. Do we, yes, please. Kindly introduce yourself. And
My name is Siddiqui as well, MS Siddiqui. So Professor Tasneem, actually, I want to point out that there was a smuggling route from Cox's Bazar to Thailand through boat. It was around 12 years back, 10, 12 years back. Then they have detected the route and they have arrested some police general. I don't know what is the position in Thailand. And also Bangladesh authority arrested some boatmen. So within 1 month, they have prosecuted the general in Thailand, and there is no news about the prosecution of the boatmen here in Bangladesh. But I don't know how they made an agreement between a general and a boatman, how they communicate with them. So something wrong is there. And very interestingly, I see from the discussion of Beluka Ferdowsi that the migration business enterprise related to migration smuggling is 57%. It's very high. And as you know, that there is a system of sending people to Middle East. It's so free visa. And Bangladesh authority never admit that there is any free visa. But it is happening, thousands of people going to Middle East through free visa. And you know, they don't have human rights, they can't change the job. Or they are authorized to change the job without any valid documents. So many problems. Now, the gentleman who intervened first, he says it is not, migration smuggling is not criminalized in Bangladesh. So problem is that you have many research on this, free visa and others. We should address it very specifically. The thousands of people going to Middle East and they don't have any labor rights, trade rights, and human rights. So it should be addressed duly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We are almost like 1:45. So yes, please. After that, we'll, if all of us permit, we will stop taking questions.
Thank you.
Two more we have. Okay,
Thank you very much.
just quickly.
Thank you very
we'll
much.
take.
This is Alauddin Ahmed. I was a member of Bangladesh Energy Regulatory Commission, and I was also a TV news host for about 3 decades, and I was a faculty and banker as well. In fact, the questions I had in my mind have already been made. So I'll only reserve to the left ones only, not to waste time. I was wondering of thanking the designer of this poster who brought this photograph of drowning people, drowning migrant. In fact, this is the truth everywhere. The ocean is engulfing the sons of our soils and sons of soils of many other countries. In fact, a meaningful picture speaks 1,000 times more than thousands and millions of words. Thank you very much. And the one thing that the Honorable Excellency Charles Whitley, Professor Siddiqui, and also the friend Director General mentioned, that we have to go to the root. The officials involved are wise and smart. Even their dogs are also wise and smart and intelligent. They don't smell the people, though we all know the name, and though we all know the phones and address, they don't. So we have to resort to kind people than wise people and intelligent people. Kind people might be from the area where they might arrange training for nurses, as Mr. Whitley mentioned, and also there can be other vocations like mechanic, auto mechanic, welders, etc. And my friend journalist who also mentioned that these are the areas we have to send trained people, not raw and untrained ones. And we also have to very sure about the market there. Libya, where is two prime ministers working rebellion and all, and we are finding that, in fact, promising market, this shouldn't be at all like that. So we have to be careful in choosing markets, and we have to be efficient in training people. Last word is, while training these nurses or say auto mechanics or electricians, we will need the help of agencies like EU or even IOM, although they are not directly involved in it, but they can make some model projects and from starting to end, prepare those professionals or vocationals, and then arrange to send them. And then after that, you mentioned of the ministry, some ministries, of course, they can also follow suit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a representation from our CID branch. If we can hear him, it will be good. Do we have him still here?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, and others. Thanks from Bangladesh Police, CID. Actually, I was thinking of that with this discussion, that there are some areas which has not been addressed yet. Especially there are the legal problems are there. Especially there are the tribunals. We are in the shortage of tribunals, and only maybe two or three tribunals are there. 7 only. The 7 was proposed in 2020, and now it is 7. So there are the problems also, and also there is a problem with the legal provisions to arrest the criminals, especially who are not directly involved. And this is the main problem. And though we have the supremacy of the law, that all the other laws these laws will be in the supremacy, will get the supremacy. There is a provision. But even though we have some other problems, especially to arrest the rackets, the total rackets and we need them, as my fellow participants from UNODC, he told also that the mutual legal assistance is also needed. It's a very tough job to any kind of, to defeat any kind of criminals. It's a very tough job to have the mutual legal acts. And there are also some provisions also there. As one of the ambassadors from maybe from Libya, he was talking that, so without the passports, yes, we have, because they are the people, they are going through the sea or the other ways. So, and even when they reach their destination, they at first they drop their passports. My previous speaker was telling that the sea is engulfing not only the soils, now not only the sound of the soils, also the passports also. They are also leaving their passports. When they arrive, I interviewed so many people, so many like this kind of people. They at first, when they reach the boat, at first they drop their passports. At first, and after that they think that we are now in the global citizen, and it is the problem. Someone from Dhaka University teachers, he was telling that I was SP Borguna at that time in 2014-15, the time when it after your reporting, I got your report at that time. At that time, I used to mobilize the people through the especially through the mosque. After the Friday prayer, after the Juma prayer, one of my officers went into all over the mosque, and there was a letter from my part. I just like this one, that you have to, at first you have to pay the money in front of the public representative, means the Union Parishad member, Union Council member, or Union Council chairman. If not possible, if you can also take the help from the chowkidars also, because as the chowkidars is the part of the government also. So when it was done, I found that it is really decreasing. And another thing was there, he proposed, I did this. I had the school community engagement program, school community policing program. At that day, every week, one of my officers went there. One officer went there in the schools, and they discussed regarding this one. Means at our Asif Munir Bhai or Ubaidul sir was at the time like this one, that we need the total all out efforts to stop this. It's the slavery. We should be aware of this slavery. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. This is 1:51 now. Do you think I should allow one more person? So, okay, kindly.
30 seconds. In fact, my name is Mahfouz Kabir. I'm from this institute. So it's regarding the reporting of this. I mean, if you see the SDG 5.1, 8.7, 10.7, 16.2, and 16.4, and then 17.9. So regarding the first, I mean, the up to 16. So the Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics is in fact in charge of reporting all this. I mean, regarding the progress of SDG and Bangladesh. And there is another institution, which is General Economic Division, which in fact prepares the annual report on the SDG progress. So if we don't have the data from the evidences, particularly from the academia or from the civil society, we have the data in fact internet. But if we have the concrete data, maybe qualitative, sometimes quantitative, we have the World Bank and even modeling system. So it provides the global data. But if we see since the Bangladesh is one of the, in fact, important in terms of number of countries. So if we have the local evidences, then the Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics can provide the credible kind of data that can be used to refer Bangladesh. So I think evidences are important. Thank you.
Yeah, I think data, I think that's a very important thing we must not forget. Otherwise, we can't argue, we can't show evidences. I wanted to give 1 minute to each of the presenters, but I think time may not allow. So if any pressing sort of remark in 30 seconds, any of you want to make, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'll just probably say on one thing. I mean, we agree with all of the things that have been said, but what the former ambassador from Libya was saying about a single stop agency, and since colleague from CID is here, I'm particularly mentioned that we need stronger collaboration between CID, SB Immigration, perhaps the Probashi Kollan Desk. So key instruments of the government, and maybe perhaps a RAB as well, who have intercepted a lot of the traffickers within the country as well. And within CID, I don't know which unit are you from, but CID organized crime, but any other units of the CID. We need stronger collaboration of working together. As such, in reality, it is not, I mean, they're working very independently. That we need to have, and there needs to be a political will for that. I think nothing else. It's just a political will. Thank you.
No, thank you. There is one more comment I would like to read. Mr. Musharraf Hussain, he wrote, we need political commitment and active participation of local representatives to protect human trafficking. We had enough rules and regulations, need to implementation of those. Awareness of mass communities is best solution to stop smuggling. I think all these are very important points, and I think we have covered a large spectrum of issues ranging from global governance to drivers to multilateral cooperation in this respect and practicalities of human trafficking, human smuggling, as well as irregular labor migration. I'll just would like to say, I have 5 minutes. So within 5 minutes, I would like to say, how many of you have seen the movie recently done by Alia Bhatt? I think that's the movie Gangubai. Gangubai, have you seen? You have seen. I think this is a movie that those who work on labor migration as well as trafficking should see this. We have hundreds and hundreds of NGO documentaries on trafficking, but they don't attract you. But this Gangubai movie straight away takes you to the crux of the problem of trafficking, of course, internal, because she was a parliamentarian in India during Jawaharlal Nehru, and she was, sold into sex trade, and how this whole issue of power, how whole issue of not victim, but how I participate in decisions that are being taken on me. And her whole being from a sex worker to representing the sex workers in parliament, I think that's a long way that she went through. And the issues that was discussed by her, it's very much practical issues. I think we need to take lesson from her, that she talked about their children in school. That is the whole issue of reintegration. She talked about how their places are being taken over by her brothels are taken over by political sort of influentials for making multi-storied buildings, and how she stopped that. Then again, in different ways, stopping them from participating in election and other things. I think that's a fascinating story, not about only victim. It is about how victims can strike back. And that is what we need when we talk about trafficking. We need to equip the victims to strike back. So the survivor, we need to change the vocabulary from victims to survivor. And we need to look at trafficking from a point of view of, we know what is the problem, but we also know conviction is the thing which is lacking. If there is conviction, if we can stop terrorism, terrorist attacks and other things in a major way, if that type of conviction is there in case of trafficking, it will happen in this case as well. It is the issue of commitment. Thank you very much. I would like to thank Mr. Ambassador Qazi Imtiaz Hussain, Chairman of BISS, as well as Major General Mohammad Maqsudur Rahman, OSP, BSP, PSC, for inviting me to chair this beautiful session and being with all these learned participants and listening to those who are participating through online. I think it's a privilege, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are almost end of the session. I hope you enjoyed a lot after hearing from our presenters. And we have enriched ourselves from their patients hearing, from their presentation. Now I would like to request you to join lunch that is organized outside of our room. So it's in the garage area and the lobby. So I welcome you all to join there. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you.